Okay, in this episode of Throttle Stop Garage, we're going to show you how to make a welding table. Anyway, so the next phase of the build is going to require that I have a decent fixturing table to get some things clamped down. And guess what I don't have? A decent fixturing table. Okay, so what I did was I just called up my local plasma table guy and I said, hey, plasma table guy, can you knock me out one of these with a bunch of holes in it? And he said, well, you got a drawing? And I said, well, sure, that's easy. It's 16 millimeter holes on 50 millimeter centers. So I gave him the dimensions, and 200 Canadian dollars later, I had this plate. Okay, so let's get rolling and I'll show you how I built the rest. I get to put it down. Not as light as it looks. All right, so another funny part of that story that I just have to tell. As I'm getting this going and I'm drilling out some holes, I was contacted by one of my siblings, actually, who runs a machine shop. And he said, are you making a welding fixture table? And I said, absolutely, I am. And he said, I got a bunch of those in the corner that I made and I've never used. So I'm going to send you one. So now I'm going to have two. His is going to be a little bit nicer than mine, but I'll show you putting that together as well. And we'll have a look at how we can build various styles of welding table, right? Total home gamer through to something that looks an awful lot like a CertiFlat piece, because that's the way he designed his. And we'll have a look at how we do all that in the effort to get this thing done. So now I'll have two planes, right, that I can put in, and that's going to be a game changer here in the garage as we get going on the next phase of the build. One of the hazards of getting this kind of stuff done on a plasma table is there is a lot of, the crusty bits at the bottom end of the hole. So I had to get in there with a chisel and knock all that off and then buff the edges with a grinder because everything was a little bit sharp. And then over to the drill press, right? And like you can only get in 2 or 3 holes, but there's hundreds and hundreds of holes to do. So these are the easy ones. And you can see my existing weld table there. It does go up and down. And I mean, I've got it with grinders and things on the edges. Sorry, I took the PPE off because I was getting tired. And then having the one open slot, or there's 2 open slots on the table, does allow me, as you're going to get a good demonstration here, to be able to do things like clean out holes. In this case, I'm just using a tapered reamer after getting some of the harder parts out. I mean, this is wicked hard on drill bits to go through this stuff, as it's reasonably hard. It's been hardened by by being flame cut. Or plasma cut, I should say. Anyway, so buff out all the holes, and then last step is to chamfer all the holes and get those cleaned and tidied up. I mean, I was trying to make these things as accurately as I could. So they came out, I mean, as close as a drilled hole can get to 16 millimeters. So they're not too bad. Then it's onto the base frame. So I didn't want this table to be all that deep, because I just don't have the space for it. So in this case, I'm just using some 50 millimeter sheared 4 millimeter plate, actually, that I was able to source locally without having to go through any terrible effort. And then I'm making a jig. So I'm making a jig to do both the pre-drill, like the starter hole, as well as the final 5/8 or 16 millimeter hole. And it is Canada, and I do leave the garage at about 5 degrees Celsius. So in order to get the bluing to dry, I have to hit it with a torch. So it's not a safety concern. It just won't dry otherwise. It's just too cold out in the garage. And then you get going on drilling all the holes. So the idea with the jig is, once that I've got a center, like an initial starter hole, drilled in each one of the bars for around the edge, then I can add in my jig, and I can do all of those holes really quickly without having to lay any more holes out. You just have to lay out the one set of holes, and then away you go. So I'm just using a 5/16 bit, and I do prefer the shorter bits. Like actually, these are stubby, or they're not jobber length. They're a shorter drill bit, and they deflect a lot less. They don't last as long if you have to sharpen them, but you do what you can. And that poor 5/8 drill bit, I sure did give it a bit of a beating on this one, but you can see it goes through it pretty easily. Getting each one of those laid in, just a simple jig, saved a ton of time. And then the center bars, right? So they don't have any holes drilled in them at all. So I'm just pairing them up, the ones that need to be paired, and then with my dry cut saw, I'm cutting. So again, the blade there is cutting about a 3 millimeter width, and I need 4. So I have to jiggle it around a little bit to trim to get the slot just right. And I have just some offcut, a little bit of scrap there that I'm using to make sure that I get the slot nice and tight to the piece of steel. So once that's done, then that's the basic machining of the whole thing done. Clean off the table and let's get together assembling the bottoms. This didn't take a ton of time, actually, not, a day on the weekend. Okay, so that's the basics of the table put together. And I'm about to start the process of welding everything up, but again, the old weld table, this weld table is not really flat. It's pretty good, but it's not great. So we're going to use my 2x4x6 machinist block, which I've now sprayed with splatter block so that any of the MIG weld splatter is not going to stick to that block, because I do actually value my tools. So I'm not going to do that. And then we're going to basically start at one corner in the middle, and then we're going to radiate out, and at each one of those corners we're going to square everything up. So just so you can get a clear idea of how that all worked out, here I'm trying to wiggle these. They wiggle just a little bit. Like when I was cutting it, I was trying to get the cuts so that things would be really accurate, or as accurate as I can make them. So we'll start with one intersection, right? So there's still a little bit of slop up and down, and we'll pull it so it's perfect, and then we'll kind of move around the grid pattern to square everything up, and then that way this base frame should be really flat, because I know that this is my hole drilled top is not very flat. I have no idea if it's going to be able to pick this up with the distortion on the lens, but no. Anyway, it's not real flat. This will be real flat when we're done. All right, so now it's time to get that each one of the intersections done. Again, that radiating pattern, that's super important. It didn't matter which table I put together, either the CertiFlat style table or the home gamer style table. They both needed to have that done that way, right? So start in the middle, work your way out. And at every time you're working your way around, you're checking to make sure that the material is perfectly flat at the top, because that's going to control the ultimate flatness of your table, right? Now, I could have gone to some extra sort of care doing this, but that big 2x4x6 inch machinist block is an absolute brilliant tool. If you don't have one and you do this kind of work, get one. Saves time. And I'm double clamping each time there just so I can weld, get 3 of the corners on the insides, and I can get the 1 corner on the outside. And then every time I'm checking those bars, because every single one of them is they're all bent. None of them are perfectly flat. So you want to put the curve going out so you can see the corner that's close to the camera here, and you can see that, okay, so the corner is out at that point in time. That's the way you want it, because you can always stretch it back, but trying to pull it together is harder, right? So then I put some little blocks in behind the big block, and then you made a nice corner where you're not going to get your tools all covered in weld. And then I tried to fit as many clamps onto this as I possibly could. Get it all pinned down. It's not going anywhere. That's the corner tacked up. Eventually I did fully weld them. And then attach the top. So those big blocks, those 2x4x6 blocks, have a 50 millimeter half-inch hole pattern drilled and tapped in them. They're not a brand name. They're actually just machinist built, so just buying somebody else's tools when they get out of the trade. And that allowed me to pull it down. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to work from the middle, and we're going to pull each one of those intersecting points down tight, and then we're going to work our way out, just tacking it in through the middle point. I saved you the pain of having to watch me do all of these, but you get each one of those done. You just keep moving it out, moving it out, moving it out. And in the end, I got it down to about 20 thou worth of warp. So that's the first table done. Really happy with the way it turned out, actually. It's really, really flat. Like, that all worked out nicely. The holes were fun to drill and then fun to ream. But hey, for a quick DIY table, That one has worked out really, really well. Actually, it's already been in service. I've already been using it. It's not even all that heavy, actually. Like, the grand total for the weight is going to be, you know, probably 50, 55 pounds. And with the full grid underneath, it stays rigid. I can easily clamp it to my bench. That actually works pretty well for me. But now we have to turn our attention to the other bench. So this is the one, this is sort of a CertiFlat copy. Again, I can't order directly from CertiFlat. Anyway, best jigsaw puzzle ever. Let's get it out and get this one built. All right, well, that was quite a gift. So I'm pretty sure my brother doesn't watch this channel, but shout out. Thank you very much for the table. And oh, by the way, if anyone wonders why I didn't buy any of these things or in the upcoming video from CertiFlat, it's because they won't sell to me because I'm Canadian. So they won't ship across the border. And that's super annoying for Canadians. Hey, we get it. Shipping is really tough, but I literally can't buy anything that you make. I would have to have it shipped to the border, and then I'd have to drive down across the border and pick stuff up as if my time actually has no value. So it's really kind of frustrating. So again, I guess you'll find that some Canadians are starting to pick up the plans that are available online. I know that this is a laser cut table again that my brother made, or at least had his CAD guy draw up, and they had it cut. And they were just building it for other welders and guys that they knew that wanted them and couldn't buy them. So it's like a little cottage industry up here in Canada. But someone should tell CertiFlat that there's 35 million people up here, and maybe there's a few of us who weld. And you can see the bend again. So I've checked each one of those plates, and the bend of the plate is going so that it's curving out, so that I can pull that corner in tight. I don't want to put that the bend of the plate going the other way, because if I put it going the other way, it's actually going to be a problem to put the table together. I've never read instructions on how to do any of this, and I didn't bother after CertiFlat wouldn't sell me anything. I didn't even look at their website, and I haven't really watched anyone else's videos. It's not rocket science to put one of these tables together, right? So I'm sure someone will tell me I did it wrong or something, but whatever. The table's together, worked fine. Anyway, a little mistake is made right about in a second here. I had a whole process for doing the corners, and I get tired. We're working a million hours, and right there I put a tack in where I shouldn't have put a tack in, right at the bottom, because I hadn't pulled the corner in tight yet. But don't worry, we'll get ourselves out of a jam on this one, as always. And the last couple of welds going in, these were, again, you got to go back in now that you're welding the entire table on the outside. You have to go back in and sand off each weld. Yeah, I have no idea if I got the last little bit, but I had the one tack here that I put in too soon. So I ground it out, hammered this over. You don't have to grind it all the way out. You just have to grind it to the point that the metal is going to move over top of the tack. So that was no problem. Drifted it over, right? And then retacked it in the proper position, just to let you know that if you make a mistake, this system allows you to fix it. It's not bad for that. Anyway, then put the last tacks in, and now the table is finished. So all I have left to do is grind up the tacks, make sure everything's neat and tidy, and then this table is done. Okay, so that's the second welding table done. So now we've got both finished, and I can safely say it's actually a little bit easier to assemble the pre-cut CertiFlat type table than it was to assemble my home built one. But when I'm done with this particular table, I find these little gouges and corners where the welds were, and the surface welding, I mean, that's going to just fill with junk over time. So pluses and minuses to each one. A little easier for one in order to put it together, a little bit more fabrication for the other. Whichever is the right solution for you. I hope you found this video informative. And hey, good luck with your welding table projects. Okay, in the next video, we're going to have a look at how we make some other fixtures to actually turn these tables into far more useful tools in the shop. See, I'm breathing heavy here, so I'm still holding the table. I know you can't see that, but I'm still holding the table. So it's right here still. Anyway, it's not done yet.